The prison does not announce itself gently. It rises from the California landscape like a slab of unfinished punishment, concrete walls stained by decades of sun, wind, and neglect. Razor wire coils along the perimeter fences in tight, merciless loops, catching the light like broken glass. Guard towers stand elevated above the yard, unmoving, their dark windows watching everything and revealing nothing. Inside this maximum security facility, time does not pass. It accumulates. The yard is a hard rectangle of cracked concrete surrounded by fencing on all sides. There is no grass. No softness. Just exposed ground where men walk slow circles, lifting weights fashioned from welded scrap metal, or standing in clusters that form and dissolve without warning. Every movement is measured. Every glance is calculated. This is not chaos. It is order built on fear. Correctional officers patrol the perimeter with practiced indifference, boots echoing against the concrete. Their radios hiss quietly with codes that never explain themselves to outsiders. Inside the housing unit, steel doors slam shut with a force that vibrates through bone. The sound becomes familiar, so familiar that inmates stop reacting to it altogether. This is the environment that waits for men after the crime. But long before Jeron Combs ever walked these corridors, something else was already in motion. The kind of prison that keeps men forever. California's maximum security prisons are designed for one purpose: containment. Inside the housing unit, cells stack vertically like drawers in a filing cabinet. Each one holds a narrow bunk, a stainless steel toilet, and just enough floor space to stand. The air smells faintly of disinfectant and old concrete. Overhead fluorescent lights burn constantly, flattening faces and erasing any sense of night or day. Men here wear their sentences on their bodies. Facial tattoos stretch across cheekbones and temples. Scar tissue wraps around knuckles, forearms, necks. Some scars come from fights. Others from weapons improvised out of melted plastic, broken metal, or sharpened debris. Every mark tells a story, and in this place, stories are currency. Inmates learn quickly who to avoid, who to respect, and who to fear. The wrong look can escalate into violence. The wrong seat can become a death sentence. This is not the kind of prison that rehabilitates quickly. This is where society sends men it does not expect back. Before prison, there was a street. Long before prison walls closed around him, Jeron Combs was just another teenager growing up in Southern California. 18 years old. Barely an adult. Outside prison, life moved fast. Arguments escalated quickly. Respect was fragile, and retaliation was immediate. On the streets, reputation often mattered more than reason, and once a conflict started, backing down was rarely seen as an option. The night that changed Jeron Combs' life did not begin as history. It began as tension. Words were exchanged. Tempers flared. A dispute escalated into pursuit. And when it ended, one man was dead and another was nearly killed. Gunfire does not echo politely. It tears through moments and leaves silence behind. By the time police arrived, the damage was irreversible. The crime that could not be undone. Jeron Combs was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. The court proceedings would later reduce the chaos of that night into evidence, timelines, testimonies, forensic details. But at its core, the case was simple and devastating. A young man had made a choice that ended a life and permanently altered his own. The jury did not hesitate. The verdict carried weight, not just legally, but symbolically. A teenager was being told, in no uncertain terms, that his life would now be lived behind bars. The sentence was severe, decades to life. At 18, Jeron Combs became a number in the California Department of Corrections. And with that number came transport. Arrival, where fear becomes permanent. The first day inside a maximum security prison is designed to strip illusions. Chains clink as inmates step off the transport bus. Heads are shaved. Clothes are exchanged for state-issued uniforms. Personal items are catalogued, sealed, or discarded. Names are replaced by identification numbers. Voices are replaced by commands. When Jeron Combs entered the system, he entered a hierarchy that had existed long before him. Young inmates are especially vulnerable. They are tested, watched, measured. Predators identify weakness quickly, and alliances form just as fast. Survival depends on learning when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to show strength. Every day inside the housing unit carries unspoken tension. Who owes who? Who crossed who? Who might snap next? The environment does not care how old you are. It only cares whether you can endure. The quiet before the long sentence. In those early months, before routines became habits, the reality of permanence set in. Count after count. Lockdown after lockdown. The slow erosion of outside identity. Jeron Combs was no longer defined by school, family, or neighborhood. He was defined by the crime attached to his file and the cell he slept in each night. The murder followed him everywhere, in paperwork, in whispered conversations, in the way other inmates looked at him. This prison was not yet the place where he would become known for creativity or ingenuity. It was simply where he learned what it meant to be forgotten. No cameras. No audience. No applause. Just concrete, steel, and time. And as the days stacked into months, and months into years, something began to form, not fame, not redemption, but adaptation. The prison had claimed him. What it would eventually turn him into, no one inside those walls could have predicted yet. Prison does not introduce people by name. It introduces them by reputation. Inside this California maximum security housing unit, every man carries a file, some official, most unofficial. The official file lists crimes, sentences, classifications. The unofficial one is more dangerous. It spreads by word of mouth, by whispers in the dayroom, by sideways glances during count. Murderers are not rare here. But how a man committed murder, and who he did it with, matters. When Jeron Combs arrived on the unit, the label followed him immediately: first-degree murder. Not manslaughter. Not accidental. Intentional. Premeditated. A conviction that placed him among men who had crossed the final line and never stepped back. In this environment, that distinction carries weight. The housing unit, a controlled pressure cooker. The housing unit operates like a small city with rigid borders. Cells line both sides of a central concrete corridor. During unlock periods, men step out cautiously, stretching stiff muscles, scanning faces, reading the room before committing to movement. Every group claims space. Benches. Phones. Tables. None of it is officially assigned, but all of it is understood. Crossing those invisible boundaries can trigger retaliation. Sometimes immediate. Sometimes delayed, which is often worse. Correctional officers maintain surface control. Inmates manage the rest. The power structure is informal but absolute. Senior inmates, men who have done decades, command respect without raising their voices. Younger inmates learn quickly who speaks for whom, who enforces rules, and who should never be approached casually. This is where Jeron Combs had to find his place. Being young in a place built for the old. At 18, Combs stood out immediately. Youth inside maximum security is not admired. It is scrutinized. Younger inmates are seen as unpredictable, too emotional, too impulsive, too willing to prove something. That makes them both liabilities and targets. Older inmates watched him closely. How he walked. Who he talked to. Whether he held eye contact too long, or not long enough. In prison, confidence is armor, but arrogance is a liability. Jeron Combs learned early that silence was safer than bravado. He listened more than he spoke. He watched how conflicts started and, more importantly, how they ended. Violence here is rarely spontaneous. It is permitted, signaled, or ordered. And until a man understands that, he is vulnerable. The crime that defined his standing. Word spread quickly about why Combs was there. A murder involving pursuit. Gunfire. A dead victim. That combination placed him in a complicated position. He was not seen as weak, but he was untested inside. In prison, outside violence does not automatically translate to inside status. Many men who killed on the street crumble under institutional pressure. Others adapt. The question hanging over Jeron Combs was simple. Which one are you going to be? Alliances, distance, and survival. Inside the unit, inmates cluster along lines that outsiders rarely fully understand. Race, geography, criminal history, and time served all influence who eats with whom, who lifts weights together, and who shares resources. Jeron Combs kept his circle tight, almost non-existent. This was intentional. New inmates who rushed to form alliances often attached themselves to the wrong people. That mistake can trap them in conflicts they did not start and cannot escape. Combs chose distance instead. He observed power from the outside rather than reaching for it. That decision likely saved him early trouble. Correctional officers noted his behavior as compliant, but compliance in prison does not equal safety. It simply delays confrontation. Every man is tested eventually, sometimes subtly, sometimes violently. And Jeron Combs knew it. The weight of time and the birth of routine. Days inside the unit blurred together. Wake-ups. Counts. Meals. Lockdowns. Time moved slowly but relentlessly. Years stretched ahead of Combs like an unbroken sentence, because they were. A life sentence does something unique to a person's psychology. It removes urgency while increasing pressure. There is no release date to work toward. No finish line to imagine. For some men, that leads to recklessness. For others, it creates focus. Jeron Combs began to structure his days tightly. Exercise. Reading. Observing. Avoiding unnecessary conflicts. He learned which guards were strict, which were indifferent, and which could be reasoned with, carefully. This discipline separated him from many younger inmates who spiraled into debt, drug use, or constant disciplinary write-ups. Still, discipline does not erase reputation. The murder remained. Respect without fear. Inside the unit, Combs did not seek dominance. He also did not project weakness. He stood when spoken to. He made eye contact. He followed the unspoken rules without advertising that he knew them. That balance earned him something rare for someone his age, neutral respect. Not admiration. Not authority. But space. Other inmates left him largely alone. That silence was not kindness, it was calculation. Men were still watching. Still waiting to see whether time would soften him or sharpen him. The role of the guards. Correctional officers noticed him too. Officers learn quickly which inmates create problems and which avoid them. Jeron Combs did not draw attention. He did his time quietly. That invisibility lowered his profile, a valuable asset in a place where attention often precedes punishment. But even the quiet inmates are not invisible forever. Every man in this unit would eventually be pulled into something, a conflict, a search, a lockdown, a rumor. The question was not if tension would find Combs. It was when. A reputation still forming. At this stage, Jeron Combs was not famous. Not feared. Not respected beyond basic boundaries. He was simply another long-term inmate learning how to survive a system designed to outlast him. But something subtle was happening. Other inmates began to notice how he used time, how he improvised, how he stayed occupied, how he avoided stagnation. In a place where boredom fuels violence, that trait mattered. The murder had brought him here. But prison was beginning to shape what he would become next. And that evolution, slow, quiet, unnoticed, was building toward a moment no one inside the unit could yet see coming. Violence does not arrive loudly. It slips in quietly, disguised as something ordinary, something familiar. On the night that would ultimately end a life and redefine Jeron Combs forever, nothing about the atmosphere suggested history was about to be made. The streets were dark, the air heavy, and tension lingered the way it always had, unresolved, waiting for a spark. The confrontation did not begin with a weapon. It began with words. Sharp exchanges, layered with resentment and pride, carried across a short distance. In places where reputation matters more than reason, arguments rarely stay verbal for long. Voices rose just enough to draw attention, just enough to make retreat feel like weakness. No one stepped in. No one forced distance between them. The moment was allowed to grow. And then came the decision that could not be undone. Instead of disengaging, Jeron Combs followed. That choice, to pursue rather than walk away, transformed a volatile argument into something far more dangerous. In the seconds that followed, intention became visible through action. The conflict moved, and with it came escalation. The presence of a firearm ended all remaining uncertainty. Until that moment, there had still been space for restraint, for survival. Once the weapon was raised, that space vanished completely. Witnesses would later describe the posture, the movement, the unmistakable shift from confrontation to execution. This was no accident. No misfire. No warning meant to scare. The gunshot tore through the night with a sound that fractured time itself. The first victim collapsed almost immediately. There was no dramatic pause, no chance to process what had happened. Panic erupted as people nearby reacted instinctively, running, shouting, freezing in disbelief. The body remained where it fell, motionless, the reality settling in before anyone could fully comprehend it. But the violence did not stop there. Another individual was struck. Wounded, but alive. That detail would become crucial later, proof that the gunfire was not singular or accidental, but part of a continued act. The chaos intensified. Fear spread faster than clarity. In moments like these, memory becomes unreliable, but certain facts do not blur. Someone was dead. Someone else was bleeding. And the shooter was gone. Within minutes, the space transformed into a crime scene. What had moments earlier been a shared environment became frozen in shock. Blood marked the ground. Shell casings lay scattered. Witnesses stood stunned, struggling to reconcile what they had just seen. Sirens approached, cutting through the confusion as law enforcement arrived and took control. The surviving victim was rushed for medical treatment. The deceased was pronounced dead at the scene. Officers separated witnesses, gathered statements, and began reconstructing the sequence of events. Stories aligned more than they conflicted. The pursuit. The shots. The direction of movement. And soon, a name surfaced again and again. Jeron Combs. He was 18 years old when he was identified as the shooter. By the time he was arrested, the trajectory of his life had already changed irrevocably. Evidence mounted quickly, witness testimony, forensic details, recovered weaponry. The system moved forward with purpose. In court, the chaos of that night was reduced to structure. Minutes became timelines. Fear became testimony. The prosecution focused on intent, the pursuit, the deliberate firing, the second victim who survived. The defense pointed to youth, impulsivity, the speed with which everything unfolded. But the jury saw something else. They saw choice. The verdict was swift and heavy. First-degree murder. Attempted murder. Words that carried permanence, not just punishment. The sentence ensured that Jeron Combs would spend decades, likely the rest of his life, inside prison walls. The outside world, with all its movement and noise, would continue without him. The crime was over. But its consequences had only begun. Inside prison, every man carries the moment that brought him there. Some boast about it. Some bury it. Jeron Combs carried his quietly. The murder followed him not as a memory, but as a label, one that appeared in files, classifications, and whispered conversations. Every steel door that closed behind him echoed that night. And no amount of time would ever fully silence it. The prison did not react emotionally to Jeron Combs' sentence. It reacted procedurally. Classification paperwork moved faster than sympathy ever could. A life sentence alters how the system views a man. Security levels are recalculated. Housing decisions are finalized. The door that closes behind someone serving decades does not reopen easily. When Jeron Combs entered the housing unit as a convicted murderer, the atmosphere around him shifted. Other inmates already knew. Word spreads faster inside prison than it ever does outside. A life sentence announces itself without introduction. Men look differently at someone who will never leave. There was no celebration. No dramatic confrontation. Just distance. Correctional officers increased monitoring during the first weeks. Long-term inmates often experience delayed reactions, anger, despair, recklessness. The administration prepared for instability that never fully came. Combs did not lash out. He did not self-destruct. He absorbed the weight quietly. Lockdowns came and went. Counts became routine again. The unit returned to its normal rhythm, but the sentence lingered like a permanent echo. Every movement forward now had a ceiling. Every plan ended at the same wall. For many inmates, that realization breaks something essential. For Jeron Combs, it redirected it. With no release date to measure life against, time stopped being something to outrun. It became something to occupy. Long hours in a cell force a man to confront himself without distraction. Some choose violence. Some choose substances. Some disappear into nothing. Combs chose structure. Years passed. His presence became familiar rather than threatening. He avoided debts, conflicts, and alliances that would tether him to other people's chaos. Guards knew his name not because he caused trouble, but because he didn't. That kind of reputation carries quiet weight in a place built on volatility. Slowly, something unexpected began to form. Inside prison, ingenuity is survival. Men adapt not because they want to, but because boredom and stagnation can be deadly. Using limited resources, Combs began experimenting with food, improvised cooking methods using commissary items, hot water, timing, and patience. What started as routine became craft. And eventually, it became visible. When videos of Jeron Combs cooking inside his cell surfaced online, the reaction outside prison was immediate and stunned. A man convicted of murder, serving a life sentence, had become a viral figure, calm, methodical, creative, inside the same institution designed to erase individuality. To the public, it was shocking. To the prison system, it was irrelevant. The sentence did not change. The walls did not move. The crime did not disappear. Inside the housing unit, reactions were mixed. Some inmates respected the discipline it took to focus on something constructive. Others dismissed it as distraction. No one mistook it for redemption. Prison does not deal in narratives. It deals in time. Jeron Combs remains exactly where the system placed him. A murderer. A lifer. A man whose moment of violence defined everything that followed. The viral fame did not undo the past. It did not bring the victim back. It did not shorten the sentence. It simply revealed a contradiction the public struggles to accept, that people who commit irreversible acts do not stop being complex once the door closes. Prison does not transform men into symbols. It freezes them in consequence. And inside these walls, Jeron Combs lives with the same reality as every other lifer: the future ends at concrete, steel, and routine. Fame fades. Trends disappear. The sentence remains. The murder is never forgotten. And the prison never lets anyone forget why they are here.